Hello, Margot Jacques here with you with another episode of Honest Culture 365. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. I'm so grateful for you. I haven't recorded in a few weeks and I just wanted to keep you up to date as to what has been going on. I've actually been working on a website for Honest Culture 365. I'm doing it by myself, so it's taking some time, a lot of thought. It's quite a um, thing to do. It's not easy. I'm not cutting and pasting or meaning like I'm not, using a already made website. I'm building it myself. So it's going to be like one homepage. You can scroll all the way down and, see everything. Not trying to do extra clicking things for now, making it simple. Maybe I'll get really tech savvy and do that one day. So been doing that. My son's last week of school was busy. Last couple weeks of school were busy. Then I went on a trip, and recently my uncle died, who was my godfather, and been grieving that with my family. He was quite a presence in my life. I'm very grateful for him and for my entire family. I got to be there at the last moments of his life, and you really just see and realize how important, how precious and important life is, and how amazing it is to have family and, things like that. So that's what's been going on. It's, it's been life. It's been life and it's been full. So, what I wanted to share as my tip of the show, tip of the day or night, is a tip from my experience this time. And that tip is, did you know that no person, place, thing, or idea can take away who you are? That is so true, rings so true in my life. I say that, when my head takes me somewhere or I hear something or whatever it may be, I interpret and I don't feel, you know, like great about myself. So I remember that and it helps me and it brings me back because it is true that there's nothing, no person, place, thing, or idea can take away who you are. So I hope that resonates and I hope it helps. So that is that. I wanted to share in this episode, the mind blowing information are the 5 words that I want to share about what a system is. I know that doesn't sound exciting. Talking about systems is probably not exciting, but it is something that has been on my mind because it's been something that just explore this with me, explore it with me. It's fascinating in the sense that the parts of a system can, I've come to realize, is that they can be put into anything, basically. And knowing these 5 components can be helpful to sort of organize everything. Um, we even have systems in our bodies. We have bodily systems. They're involuntary or voluntary. And there's like 11 or 12 of them. And they also have these 5 parts. And those 5 mind blowing words are input, process, output, feedback, and relationships. And let me just tell you specifically what that means. So an inputs in a system is what goes into the system, obviously, right? Then we have processes, which is what happens inside the system. And then the output is what comes out of the system. The feedback is the information about how well the system is working. And the relationships are how the parts connect and influence each other. Um, it's fascinating because that word relationships that are in a system, that's in a system. That's one of the components. And I believe that this time and age that we are in right now, it's one of the things that we are really coming to, like, there's a lot of awareness now to the relationship part of systems. Because I say this because the information that we have about food and how we treat our bodies and, exercise and all these things, this has all, like, been in the last, couple of decades that we have really learned this information through data, through, science, through, different, additional kind of doctors and case studies and whatever it may be, however information is brought in and data is collected. Now we have, man, data is collected like crazy now. It is a given, data. And it's helpful to know these things, right? Because you get enough data and you can get a pretty good idea as to how something is working, right? So, but the relationship, like the relationship of how, we treat our bodies, the systems in our bodies, what is good for them, what is not good for them, Not too long ago, we even had a different food pyramid. Not too long ago, we didn't know about, like, weightlifting is good for bone density, things like that. There's so many things that we are learning, even like how too much of something is not good, or, what things are good, naturally to do for yourself and eat and put in your body, or, things like that. Certain chemicals we're finding out also, right? Like that's been in food for a long time, and we have been eating and putting in our bodies. So it's important that we know, the relationship part of the systems, right, of our system, in our bodies, all the systems in our bodies. How are they working, right? And we can know this by all the things that, we input, and we find out, right? This is how we find things out. So it's so interesting to me because those five components can be you the financial system is made up of those five components. You got input, which is money. The financial system was created, for money. But also input, there's labor, there's resources, there's information is also part of that system, right? The input. But what are we putting into the financial system? It's mainly made for money, right? So then we have the process, right? So there's credit card processing, there's, the investments, there's the spending, right? So there's the process. And then the output. It's the goods, the services, the wages, the profits, right? And then the feedback is, the prices, the interest rates, like how well is the system doing? Like are prices going up, the interest rate, going up, whatever it is, like that is the feedback, what's going on, and then you've got the relationships, which are, the consumers, you have the businesses, the banks, the lenders, the governments, the markets, all these different parts that, the relationships. What do these relationships look like within the system, And at the same time, I've also been talking about consumer rights, right? The consumer rights, the four fundamental ones. There's eight consumer rights, but there's four fundamental ones that President John F. Kennedy, was talking about, and that he brought those in, and he this the right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to choose, and then the right to be heard. And I say this because, I'm not just like, oh, consumers, this, you need to do this, it needs to be both sides because this is the thing. Everybody is a consumer. Why are we even living separately? You know, everybody's a consumer. And these consumer rights need to be used responsibly, but even people, businesses are run by people, and so are banks. So are all these other things within the financial system, they're all run by people, right? It's just maybe a group of people. So there's a lot of people under one entity, but it's still, an entity, and it's still run by people, and those are consumers. So it's like living separately. It's like things seems like everything is being separated. It's like consumers and businesses and whatever it is. And, you know, I think businesses, I think it should be a good thing to get information from people, but it needs to be people with integrity that are living, with integrity, meaning whatever they choose to say about a business or to a business, it should be honest and righteous. Um, and it's all about honesty, really. And businesses need to not be deceptive to the consumers, not be taking advantage of vulnerabilities, because there is the right to be informed. And people end up, maybe they wake up and maybe they don't, but there are those rights where, the business doesn't want to be lied about and the consumers don't want to be lied to, right? Again, everybody's a consumer. Everybody is a consumer. Every business, whatever is run, any entity is run by a consumer. So we are all connected in some way, and there needs to be both sides to this. We need both to be honest. It's so important for that to happen because what ends up happening is the input into the financial system ends up being like fraudulent stuff, right? Like it's supposed to be money, labor, resources, information, but then what if it's like wrong money, the bad money, or it's, uh, sort of the, you know, labor that's not right. It's like not right, to how it's people are being treated or the resources, like falsified stuff, anything that could be deceptive, like, just for gain, and it's not for and people are not working together because if consumers aren't being honest and businesses aren't being honest, that just ends up being a toxic relationship, and even if it's just one-sided, like let's say one person is being honest, let's say the consumer is being honest, but the business is being deceptive, you know, well, everybody, I don't know, not everybody, but we know that there's toxic relationships out there, and that's a toxic relationship, however you look at it, whether both are being deceptive or one is being deceptive and trying to fool the other. That is not sustainable. It does not work. It causes damage to both sides. Whether one is aware, that they're deceiving, that still hurts. That still hurts the business, because that ends up getting no matter what that will come out eventually. Those things come out, It's not a sustainable way to be, you know um and then the consumer that gets deceived or the consumer that lies, right, and tries to cheat the system, that ends up getting found out, or the consumer that, you know, gets lied to, and that just ends up not doing well for people either, and then they don't trust, and, things like that. It causes damage, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, what I'm trying to say is, the different part components, we can really organize those and see what they're about, right? So with these 5 words, right? So the input and then the process, right? So the process in a financial system is like the production, the spending, so people put money into the system to spend it, right? And then the output is so they end up with the goods and the services, or the input is the labor and the process is, you know, the production, right? And then the output is the wages, the paycheck, right? And then you've got, feedback, right? Feedback are, the prices go up or down or whatever it is, like, the profits, the losses, things like that. Like, how well did it do? And then, then the interest rates, things like that. How well did that go? And how well is that doing? Because the financial system is a very large system, but it all is connected. It's all a system, one system. We're using it for money. So it is all interconnected. We are all connected through this, you know? Um, and then that last piece, that relationship piece, which is one of the pieces that I believe, that I've been exploring or I've been really thinking about because of how everything else has been sort of turning out, is the relationship is like sort of a new realization that we have. And on top of that, the relationships with the consumers and the businesses and the banks and all these people, what are the relationships with all of these people, right? With the consumers and banks and businesses and all that. Um, Again, I was talking about the consumer rights, and that right to information. We have the right to be informed is so important to have. And it's a time that is it's a time that is a completely different sort of time. This we've got this digital age. We have, everything is moving fast. We have all this technology, and it's like the wild, wild west, this wild, wild west where it's just open. Everything's open, and there's so much opportunity to come in, and, there's people that just try to they commit fraud, and it's it's happening everywhere because of the vulnerabilities of people not knowing information. And, that falls on the way people are informed, like the way businesses and banks and everyone chooses to inform the consumers or the people, because again, they're consumers too. They're consumers too. So it's not us against them, but sometimes it seems like it may be that way because of the misinformation or not enough information, or maybe they're not informed either, and they're not given that, piece of, that sentence or that wording or that paragraph that they need to give somebody that would help them tremendously for protection and safety wise to keep money safe and things like that, right? So it's like, or you have to pay for it in order to get this information or whatever, when everybody has the right to be informed, period. And so maybe like by looking at it in that way, and so there's these consumer rights and stuff like that, and that they need to be used responsibly, of course, and everybody needs to be responsible with how they choose to, you know, what they choose to do with those rights. Those rights should not be used or abused. They are there for a reason, and it's for, they're supposed to work when everyone's being honest, right? Like a business, let's say, did something and it was, wrong, and they got the feedback and they got a complaint, and they didn't even realize maybe that that's what was happening, right? But they fix it. Okay, cool. That's great. You become a better company that way. You become a strong company, you know? But then there's, like, places that, or maybe people don't end up complaining, or they somehow make a deal or something happens, and or it's such a deceptive company that, everybody even involved in it, can just, you know, it just gets by, right? And people are tolerant to not getting enough information, or they don't ask the right questions. They don't even know what questions to ask. You've got fine print everywhere. You got pages and pages and pages of contracts and stuff. And then you're trusting the word of mouth of somebody that's just having you sign things and stuff like that. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. All that stuff that you're supposed to read and know about, right? Here's a tip. Next time that occurs, put it into ChatGPT. It'll tell you more than what you would probably understand, because most of those types of things are written in, you know, uh, a different language, because you got to be like a lawyer to read those things, and that's the thing. not everybody has a degree or knows all this stuff within the financial system, and it's like it seems like this has gotten lost, it's kind of gotten mixed up where you have to like go to like, 4, 6 years of schooling to be able to not be vulnerable within the financial system. And that's not what it was created for. But again, we have a right for information. So we have a right to be informed. We also have a right to be heard. And if something happens, we can say something. And, but this needs to be properly and responsibly done. The businesses on the other side, you know, um, you know, should take all that and build a better business if there are things that were found out. And businesses shouldn't be deceptive trying to find vulnerable people to get away with things because there's a certain type of people that it's possible that they know exactly what type of people that they can target, the fraudulent sort of companies that are trying to, scam people or get away with, um, taking advantage of the system because they know certain things. And there's people that are just vulnerable, unfortunately. And this occurs. And there's a big mix up in this input, the process, the output. You know, we are allowing certain inputs that do not need to go in, right? And it's the same thing with our bodies, right? We know, right? Something is not healthy. We know smoking is bad, so we don't smoke, right? But some people, can't stop. Understandable, it's an addiction, but we know this. We know for a fact that it kills, right? So we don't do it. Or there's something we know that is poison and we know it can kill us, right? Are we going to take it? No, we're not going to input any of that kind of stuff in our body, specifically if we know, right? So if we know what input can be, what is kind of messing things up, because we know what fraud does, it does the opposite of what we're trying the financial system to do. It takes the money, takes our money, and it steals our money, right? So, we definitely don't want that going in, so the way to do that is one of the ways to do that is to, if you run into a company or something like that occurs, fraud occurs, you want to report it. You want to bring it up and get it recorded. Also, there's protection for people. Hopefully, it would be nice that if you got a bank account, that the bank, whoever is opening up the account for you, could tell you to turn on your notifications. Maybe even do that with you. Um, they give you the app, but you have to choose to do these things, right? And then you, as a person, have an email and you have passwords. So that's up to you to change those things. So that's another thing. So there's those protections, right? To prevent it from happening. So the input, we don't want to input that kind of stuff. We don't want to input fraud into the system, right? Um, so we know these things. We know what can happen. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. I had, the systems thing on my mind. It's just something fascinating because, again, those 5 words can be put into even as um like spiritual system or, my life is the system, right? In a way. Like um what do I input to my life, right? What am I inputting? What information am I giving myself? What am I learning, right? Like what am I putting into my body, my brain, my spirit, whatever that may be, like what am I filling myself with? What am I giving myself, right? And then what is the process? How am I processing all of this stuff? How am I metabolizing everything? How am I processing what I just put into my body? How do I do that? Do I talk to people? Do I not talk to people? Do I physically work out? What am I doing? with what I put into my body and my thoughts, then the output. What is the output? What is the output? Um, what am I putting out? How am I acting? What am I doing? Things like that. And then there's feedback, what's going on? How am I treating people? What am I looking like? And then you got the relationships, how am I interacting with all those things in my life, like people, places, things, ideas, all these things, right? So what am I doing? Anyways, there's a bright light in my eye. I may have to turn it down. It's hurting my eyes right now. But okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts, but and I probably sounded like I was all over the place. But if you can get the gist of it, I mean, you can fast forward, rewind this, whatever. But there is something to this, and I'm gonna keep digging into it. I think that it's gonna be a helpful thing for people to um, be able to sort of organize things and for us to know and learn about systems. Like it's not, we don't need to go get a degree, we don't need to do any of that. We can learn about what are the parts of a system and then we can look at that ourselves and we can see how that would relate to our lives. Like what is our relationship to the financial system? What do we input to it? What's our process with it? What exactly happens with our output through it? What's the feedback we're getting? With the system, what are we getting by using the financial system? Are we getting good feedback? And then the relationships, what is our relationships? Are we being honest? Are the businesses being honest? Are banks being giving us enough information? Is anybody, giving each other enough information? Are we able to speak about if something we don't agree with something? And I'm not just talking about like, you know, goods and stuff. I'm talking about like services, people's services. That's a big one, and what are relationships with all these things, and I think it's going to be something that would be helpful to be able to know this because I think we've not been it's just gotten a lot of things have gotten lost. I think, it's just gotten lost. There's a lot of sort of trust, word of mouth trust with a lot of sources, including, like, look, we're all consumers on both sides, okay? Businesses believe, all these things that, the customers, consumers, whatever, are believing them. And then we've got, people believing, the people that are working and giving information to, the consumers, the people. We're trusting different types of services by word of mouth. And, there needs to be more. There needs to be more than just verbal. I know that there's documentation and stuff that, again, that's lingo that may not be understood, right? So we need to be able to understand that and know what it says without having to go to law school. So, there's got to be a middle ground with some things, so uh, more to come, with protecting yourself from like fraudulent stuff. But would be so good for everybody to just understand their relationship with the financial system and with all the other systems, and even with their own life, and their own bodily systems, how about that? How about for health benefits, We do that. We have specialists for everything, right? So there's all these things, but I'm not even talking about medically. I'm talking about just your own knowledge for your own self, you know, um, where that if you've dug into it and because you know your body, and you got to get that right information, Um, getting it from legitimate sources, and there are obviously legitimate sources everywhere, but there's also a lot that may not be, due to the fact of the many, many different forms, many different ways now of even, like, money, right? Money is not just dollar bills, $5 bills, $10 bills, $100, it's not even we don't even use coins really anymore, right? So, we've got crypto, there's so many different forms. There's credit, money that is, not even money, it's just, like, where did it come from? It's credit, right? So, there's all these different forms, and then now there's because of the digital age, right? This technology that we have, which is amazing, human potential is absolutely amazing and limitless. It's so amazing. So, the all the who I don't even know, thousands of ways to even, like, you know, make a payment. There's so many different ways to run your business, how to take payments, how to pay, how you choose to pay. We got wallets here. You got I d is there like a million types of credit cards? I mean, everywhere I look, there's a new credit card. So there's all these different ways, and it's just this like the way I can best way I can explain is the wild, wild west. Like, here you go, open terrain, do what you want, make a new way. It's like all these new ways, all these new opportunities. It's amazing. It's just in the midst of that, there's, you know, not enough information, not enough of the right questions, and some vulnerability. So there's many different ways, I'm sure, uh, that if we just do even a little bit at a time, right? It can completely help change, the way, you know, the system works, right? Because there's just a lot of stuff that shouldn't be there, right? That we need to be more aware of because we can help it. We don't have to be vulnerable. Nobody has to be vulnerable, including businesses, and banks and all that stuff. Everybody, because again, everybody is a consumer. Everybody. It's just again, the entity is a business or it's a corporation or whatever it may be, and there's a group of people that are under one name. Okay. And but they're all consumers. We just work together and help each other and build trust. Build trust. Build trust, and that'd be amazing, and, because again, my thought, again, I'm just exploring here, my thought and my thought, and I wanna say belief, but what I've come to, put together in my head is, money is counted with the numerical system. We chose the numerical system to count money. And money, and there's an unending amount of numbers. So money is infinite, right? I mean, could that be possible? I believe it's possible. I believe it absolutely is. I mean, there's nobody that said, okay, there's a cap on the amount of money. Have you ever heard anybody come out and say that? I've not heard anybody come out and say there's a cap on anything. That's it. $4 trillion. No more. No more. There's That's not gonna happen, you know? So, which means money is limitless, and I think that's a good way of looking at it, and that, there's plenty out there and that you are your own source of money, being attached to whatever it is, and it's not you're whatever. You can be your own source. That's a whole nother episode. That's a whole nother episode of that. But, you know, we are our own source. We can be our own source of the human potential and we can create it. And we have that, look around at the world, how amazing it is and all the new things every single second of the day. There is something new. right? Created. We are all creators. So that is what I have for today. don't I don't even know if I am going to post this because I don't even know if I'm going to put it in. I might. But that's okay. I've gotta do something. I've gotta put something out there. These are my thoughts and so here we are. And I want to let you know that this moment right now is the most powerful moment that you will ever be in. You can choose anything and you can be you. And that is powerful. So know that you are powerful. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.